Hello and welcome back to another GCSE revision video. Now guys, what I want to go over today is Macbeth, GCSE English literature. And of course, in my past few lessons, I've been focusing a lot on language, paper 1 and paper 2, but I do know that a number of you guys, as we are officially in mock exam seasons, are going to be having your literature paper 1 and paper 2 assessments coming up, and Macbeth, which is a very popular text with most schools, is probably going to be one of your set texts in your upcoming mock assessments. So if you have Macbeth as part of your upcoming mocks, guys, what I want to share with you in this lesson is the cheat code to get some super easy and also fairly sophisticated AO2 analysis mocks and AO3 context points when it comes to making this one super simple and super easy point in any Macbeth essay. This is regardless of whatever character you get in your upcoming Macbeth mocks or even themes. This point, I would like to suggest, memorize this point and use it in any Macbeth essay that you are writing. And not only will you impress your teachers, but you're going to see a massive difference in the grades that you get in your Macbeth mocks. So what is this one point that you can use in any Macbeth essay that you write that not only will get you amazing analysis points but also top context points? This one point is to do with divine right of kings. This is my favorite context point, not only because it's such a great point which cuts to the heart of Shakespeare's message in Macbeth, but also it actually ties really nicely with the main characters as well as the main themes within the play. Remember that when it comes to divine right of kings, which is obviously one of the central context points in Macbeth, divine right of kings is literally all to do with the idea that Jacobeans at the time believed that the king was directly appointed by God, and going against the king, thinking of committing treason, regicide, killing the king, or even disobeying the king was directly disobeying God. And of course, Macbeth, what does he do? He commits the worst sin of all. He kills King Duncan and violates divine right of kings. Then Scotland descends into chaos, okay? So that's the context, just in case you weren't clear. And also, by the way, if you want just a very easy and visual explanation of divine right of kings, this coming month, actually, what I'm going to be posting on Substack is lots of really nice visual freebies that you can use, especially for Macbeth. And one of the freebies is going to be this divine right of king illustration that I created, showing the great chain of being and showing you in very easy visual ways how to understand divine right of king. So literally just head over to Substack, download that freebie and use that as part of your revision. Now, why is divine right of kings an amazing point to use in any Macbeth essay? Let me show you really how you can use this point, not only to get some really easy context points, but more importantly, also to get some really amazing analysis points. Why is divine right of kings such a great point? And honestly, a bit of a cheat code if you want to do really well in Macbeth. Number one, remember that if and the moment you do mention divine right of kings in any Macbeth essay that you write, regardless of whether it's a Macbeth essay, whether it's Lady Macbeth essay, ambition, guilt, whatever question that you get, the reason why it's such an amazing point to use is because it links to the play's central crime, which leads to tragedy. As I've mentioned, divine right of kings was violated by Macbeth. When, after the witches planted the seeds of ambition in his mind, he decided to move forward with the plan to kill King Duncan, and he murdered the king and obviously took over his position as king himself. And this led from Macbeth being this tragic hero, or rather this hero even. So he went from being this noble hero who we all really admired at the beginning of the play to being the shadow of his former self, this tragic figure by the end. It is because he violated divine right of kings. You need to remember that, commit that to memory and write about it in any Macbeth essay that you write. It is part of Shakespeare's central message. Remember that when this play was first performed before the court of King James, who was a new king, Shakespeare was trying to convey to all the noblemen in the audience who were watching this play alongside the king that they shouldn't think about overthrowing this guy, because the chaos that they see in Macbeth is what would happen in England and in Scotland if they overthrew King James, okay? Now, the second reason And the second point you can talk about in any Macbeth essay when you're writing about this theme, divine right of kings, is talk about how this context point, divine right of kings, is used by Shakespeare to highlight the dangers of the supernatural influencing you. Okay, so remember, Macbeth kills King Duncan after he develops ambition. Why does he develop ambition? It's because he encounters the witches who tell him, "Hail Macbeth, that shall be king hereafter." They plant the seeds of ambition in his mind. He lets himself be influenced by the supernatural, and that therefore leads him to not only develop ambition, but he violates divine right of kings by killing the king. Okay, now remember that King James at the time was actually super obsessed with the supernatural and especially witches playing some kind of part in his demise, in him being overthrown and even killed. Okay, so the moment you start talking about how divine right of kings is also used by Shakespeare in the play to emphasize the dangers of listening to and being influenced by the supernatural, once more, you're not only analyzing whatever point you're talking about in Macbeth, but also more importantly, you're getting some amazing AO3 points. The moment you start doing this, in all honesty, if you even just talk about just these 2 points, you're probably already going to find yourself in grade 6 category, right? But now, how do you even move up? How do you really bring these points home? And really, all you're just doing throughout your essay is just referring to the same context point. I'm now going to touch on how this point is relevant regardless of whatever character that you get in your upcoming Macbeth question. And by the way, if you are looking at this and you're like, okay, this is really helpful, but I want to see how does that look like in practice in an actual essay, don't forget that I'm actually going to be doing a Macbeth GCSE one-off revision class during October half term. Okay, this is going to be on the 27th of October. And during that half term week from the 27th of October all the way to the 2nd of November this year, I'm going to be having an intense series of literature classes. All of them are one-off, looking at Macbeth, Christmas Carol, Inspector Calls, Power and Conflict, Unseen Poetry, Romeo and Juliet, and Jekyll and Hyde. So if you want to know how to really boost those marks and also to see a grade 9 model answer that I'm going to be going over in a super intense 1-hour class, just simply join in that class. Now, as I said, the third thing that you can tie this to when it comes to any character, right? This is divine right of kings. How can this be tied to any character? Well, in terms of divine right of kings, Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, who are obviously the most popular characters you can anticipate a question on, or even both of them in a relationship, of course, divine right of kings highlights them directly. They violate divine right of kings. Their ambition, their lust for power is what leads them to go against the great chain of being, go against God, and ultimately violate divine right of kings. However, let's say you get a question on Banquo, or maybe Macduff, or one of the other characters. What's really interesting and how can you still tie this point, divine right of kings, to these other characters, right? Because Macbeth and Lady Macbeth are notable for violating this. But actually the flip side of that is also true. Remember, if you get a question, for example, on Banquo and Macduff, talk about how they are shown as the quintessential Jacobean men at the time. Their response, so especially for example, the character of Banquo, he is told by the witches that his children will be kings. He listens to that, he's like, okay, that's great, but he does nothing about it, okay? And he demonstrates the response that people should have instead of the response that Macbeth had. In other words, he doesn't act on any form of ambition, he doesn't develop ambition, and he doesn't say, oh, okay, my kids are gonna be kings, what do I need to do to make this happen, right? He just lets fate take its natural course. Obviously, Macduff, he's the one that discovers the dead body of King Duncan. And what's really interesting is the immediate response he says is it's a most sacrilegious murder. This demonstrates his reverence. He reveres, he respects divine right of kings, right? So remember, if you get any of these characters in your upcoming Macbeth question, you can literally talk about their violation of divine right of kings, i.e. Macbeth, Lady Macbeth, and the role that the witches play, or conversely, if they're not those three characters, their respect for divine right of kings, okay? And as I said, this context point is my favorite context point. And also, as I said before, if you want to see how this looks like in an essay, especially if you want to see a grade 7, 8, or 9 winning essay for Macbeth, I'm going to be having a one-off Macbeth GCSE Intense Literature class. This is going to be during half-term week, okay? So on the 27th of October, if you were interested, you can simply sign up for that one-off masterclass. And of course, during that class, you can ask me as many questions as you want to do with Macbeth. And obviously, you will not only get model answers for this question or the question that I go over, but also an amazing cheat sheet that I've created for all of my students who've been part of my past literature classes who really found it helpful in their Macbeth revision. So thanks so much for listening.